Should the British Army completely scrap the regimental system as it's set up as it is today? Or even so, has that actually already started to happen right in front of our own eyes? That's the question and the topic we're going to break down today on today's video. To circle back to this, I have to put myself back into when I was in Section Commander's Battle Course in Brecon around circa 2012, I believe it was. And a part of that syllabus in our tactics phase was to deliver a debate. So the DS, so the directing staff, give us all Lance Corporals a question as a section to go away, research, and then you would debate that against the other sections within the platoon. I think they've done it at the very start of tactics to sort of, it's a different way of doing an icebreaker to get confidence in speaking in front of people, that kind of thing. For my section, and it was delivered by a parachute regiment colour sergeant, our question was, should the regimental system be scrapped? And we just go to this kind of like, like an example like the Americans, like you'd have infantry battalion 1, 2, 3, 4, mountain troop, blah, blah, blah. So you lose all the regimental stuff and it just becomes that role, whatever it may be. So that was back in 2012. So obviously for that colour sergeant to pose that question to us as students on that course to debate, quite clearly he has heard that somewhere back then around his echelons of when he was at like sort of senior management kind of thing, as he was a senior NCO. So quite clearly that question must have been fired around. Fast forward to now, 2025. Quite clearly there's quite a number of years progressed since then. Quite a lot has changed. I have to use the other example now of myself because that's where I've got the experience. I am in the Royal Irish Regiment. Even though that we work in 16 Brigade, so we're tasked to them operationally, and when we deploy, it's with either one of the two para battalions or the Gurkhas, whichever battalion is within 16 Brigade at any time, and we do our light recce strike within that role. When it comes to career management, so MS, we're managed as a division, and our division that we're a part of is called the Union Division. And in that Union Division, you've got the Royal Regiment of Scotland, so you've got all the Scottish battalions in there, all the same minus one Scots, who's obviously now went to one Ranger. We'll unpack that later. So you've got us, Royal Regiment of Scotland, the Yorkshire Regiment, and the Royal Welsh. 4 of us, isn't it? Yeah. Used to be the Celtic Division a couple of years ago, which was all of the above except the Yorkshire Regiment. They've now introduced the Yorkshire Regiment to that division and called the division now the Union Division. Okay, what makes this different? Within that whole division, you've got different roles within there. I've already lightly talked about myself as the Royal Irish. We are light recce strike within 16 Brigade. We're not going into full details what that role is. It's a completely different video. You've got all the Scottish battalions will have their own sort of roles mixed between light role, so just on your boots, light protective mobility, which is like the Foxhound. You've got the Yorks, which were on the trials and development, and believe their second battalion, which is in it, is light role as well, or light protective mobility. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then you've got the Royal Welsh component, which brings that armour piece, okay? So and then us with 16 Brigades, so you're doing all these different things, and we will never, not technically, you wouldn't deploy with each other, okay? When we're deploying under 16 Brigade with the powers and all the rest of it. But when it comes to MS, like your career management, it's managed within that division-wise. So for an example, it's not a big crazy thing from from Ranger in my aspect, the Jocks and all the rest. We all different Fusiliers to the Welsh. You get different terminology for that base centered rank. So just private soldier. So from private soldier, Lance Corporal, you're pretty much guaranteed you're just going to stay where you are within your own battalion regiment if that's what you've wanted to go and join, and you've got that battalion regiment and you're in there. You're pretty much safe as it is. It becomes slightly different nowadays whenever you're in the senior NCO part. Well, I would say senior screw when you're going to promote to sergeant, or if you're a sergeant or a colour sergeant, and WO2, sergeant major, all the rest of it. So them senior ranks. When you get to that stage of the game, every job that you do will last 2 years. And at the end, coming up towards that end of that 2 years, you will do a thing called a triple P. It's a posting preference performer form, whatever it is. It's online, and it's you or them making your choices of what job you would like to do next. Now, if you're someone who is already of a certain rank, so if you're already, let's use a sergeant for an example, you're already a sergeant, you've promoted to a sergeant, all the jobs that are available coming up to the picking time, you have first choice over all them jobs, because as a sergeant you need to have a job as a sergeant, so you'll take all them up. Any of them jobs, the pool of jobs which are placed across all of the division, in this case, this example we're using, so the Union division, so all across the Royal Welsh, all across the Jocks, all across the Yorks, and ourselves, the Royal Irish. Once all the sergeant jobs have been dished out, any of the jobs that are still left there, they'll be left then for a corporal in any one of them units I just discussed to promote into. And that is the exact same example for sergeant going to colour sergeant and colour sergeant going to WO2 sergeant major. Now, this is where the whole regimental thing comes down to and what I can see that's going on right now. The first turn of the hat as this started to happen, a lot of people did not want to. So for an example, let's use a smaller job where there's less jobs available. For example, right, let's use this as an example. Say there's only 3 colour sergeant jobs in the Royal Irish. There is more, but just for this example, pretend there's only 3, and they're all for CQMS jobs. You then apply for them CQMS jobs. Depending on where you are and you've scored on your board, which goes to the division as well, will depend on who gets that job. Now, if I'm Royal Irish and I want to do a CQMS in my own battalion, happy days, I'll put all them down. If there's someone else in one of the other battalions within that whole division, for example, say they've done something crazy and good over the year and they've got a really good report and they've scored higher on their board and they don't really care about staying in their own battalion. They just want to which is quite rightly, advance their career at the quickest opportunity. There's no jobs in, let's use Royal Welsh for example. Say there's no jobs for colour sergeant in the Royal Welsh. However, there's 3 jobs there in the Royal Irish. If that person from the Royal Welsh puts that triple P down and they've scored higher and they meet all the criteria, they will then get that job. So if there's someone who scores slightly lower than the Royal Irish, they won't get that job. So they'll either not promote or they'll have to get a job elsewhere. Now, over time, as this progressively happens, what you'll start to see is people serving from either of these battalions, so Royal Welsh, Scots, Yorks, all the rest of it, serving in each other's battalions. And then where they're serving in the sergeant's mess, so that's senior. I'll have to argue that the sergeant's mess of any infantry regiment is your sort of like, that's where the business end of it is. Yes, all the, everything else, there, you need everything to make it work, but that heartbeat comes from there because the experience is in there and a lot of people who are in that mess are invested in that unit and everything that makes that unit. As soon as you start to pollinate everyone, and this will probably take years, I think anyway, as this continues to go on, years and years and years, where you have different people serving from different units in that mess, and then what you'll find is if the call gets made, I don't know, 9-10 years down the line, going, right, okay, we're gonna get rid of this regimental stuff. We'll still keep all the memorabilia in that. It'll go to all the regimental museums and stuff and all the rest of it, and there will still be a slight nod to the hat. But anyone who's going to be joining now, you're going to be joining for a role. So you're going to go armoured. It's not right, I want to go Royal Welsh in the armour. It's not, I'm going to go armoured. Okay, you'll go to that one. Armoured Division 1 or Armoured Regiment 1. Okay, I want to go like Light Recce Strike. Okay, you will go to Light Recce Strike and 16 Brigade. I want to go, so let's use an easier example would be sort of your Light Royal Infantry. So Light Royal Infantry is basically no armour, nothing. It's just you with your kit and equipment. Light Infantry Battalion 1. And so that could be just no one anymore. It's just you've got the 4 infantry battalions that used to be something else, but now they're just that specific role. And when you come to do that change, because we've all pollinated across all these different regiments for so long, when that decision actually comes down to be made, there'll be less pushback from people serving because they've just been used to working everywhere, and that whole sort of ethos behind your regiment will have just gone over time because you've just liquidated it by doing something different over as the years progress. Now, I don't want to, and I think if you were to say this 15 years ago, right, we're getting rid of the regimental scheme, they would have been up in arms because there's a lot, it's just that idea of doing it would have had a lot of pushback. So I think personally, I've got no inside gen here information, I think that decision's more than likely already been made. And whenever you're making high level change decisions, I think these are things that just aren't done overnight, and they need to be done over, and there'll be an action time plan of when it's going to happen. And I think we're currently now in 2025 living that plan now, where it's slowly cross-pollinating everyone to then finally we'll get to a certain point whatever year, whatever deadline it is, and then that will be made, and it'll just be very easy to make and no pushback because we'll have all have just been everywhere. So for people like me who've had one foot in in each team set, the regimental system potentially whatever it's going to look like in the future, of course I'll have no, this is not this is not for me in XYZ. But someone who's joining right now, so a private soldier, it might not mean as much to them because they will have been born into the army whenever they can go anywhere. And right now, as it stands, I'm pretty sure because it was I heard about it a couple of years ago. It must be in full force now in ITC Catterick, so Infantry Training Centre Catterick. That someone joining Catterick now, they may have an idea what they want to do in the infantry or where they want to go, but until week 6, I want to say, I could be wrong. Jump in the comment section below if you know. They don't know what that's going to be, and they will do exactly what I said that we do now as sergeants and stuff. Is they'll do triple P, so a PPP, post and preference performer, and apply for where they want to go to, and it'll all come down to numbers and all the rest of it, I believe. And I don't know what way that then they make the SIF and decide who goes where. And the only other sort of exempt people from in the army from that is of course the parachute regiment. It's because quite clearly you need P company. So that's a selecting course that needs to select. So quite rightly anyone can go and apply, but if you ain't going to pass P company, you're not going to go to any of the para battalions. Then so that's all the gem. I'm interested to know what you think. So positives and negatives to that. Let's go with the negatives first. It's like, and it goes back to a previous video I talked about where I talked about someone's motivating factors for them wanting to do this role, this lifestyle, because this is not a job. This is not Tesco's. We're just walking up 9 to 5. As soon as the clock finishes, you can just leave it all at home. There's loads of stuff to think about in this lifestyle. You got to keep currently fit. If you've got stuff on the next day, you got to think about tactics in some way. If you're going to go getting ready to go on operational deployment, it's going to take you away from your life for 6 months. If you are someone who lives single living in from your initial start, you're going to be living away from home, so you're living where you work. So it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. So people's motivating factors for joining is different, and some of the motivating factors is family inheritance. And the big one for us is when you look back to the previous big wars, people may be following in their sort of grandfather's footsteps and all the stuff because that's the antecedent regiments of what they're going to join. And then I suppose you could argue now as well, as we start getting further and further away from the world wars, do they become less irrelevant then to the younger generation where they're not thinking about it anymore, and that great-grandfather is now suddenly turned into a great-great-great-grandfather, so it's not as irrelevant anymore, and maybe that's not a motivating factor. But for some, that may be a motivating factor, and it may, they may be too scared to not want to join because they might not, because this regimental system isn't there anymore. So, okay, well, my grandfather done that. He was in the Royal Irish Fusiliers, so why would I go join Infantry Battalion 1? That's what I mean. However, with the younger generation, you can't look at it with an old head on shoulders, whatever that sort of terminology is. You got to look at it where what is the next lot going to be doing and thinking about in their head, and obviously we have to have the main objective in our eyes is to fight and win wars, to fight and win wars with good lethality, and if that's the way to go to do it, that's the way to go to do it. Positives. I had to think hard about this because clearly when I joined, I went to join the Royal Irish Regiment, and for me personally now, it's if it was given to me upon leaving where I am now, and I was like, trying to go, because let's look at my next jobs. My next job is going to be like a sergeant major. There's what, 2, 3, 4, say 4 sergeant majors in an infantry battalion roughly. If it's your normal infantry battalion, it's not. I don't know about armour and all the rest of it. But if it comes to my time where I've got the promotion and I'm putting my triple Ps in, and there's no slots in the Royal Irish, then I would probably then defer, which is probably going to hurt me now career-wise and might not make it to certain ranks because if you've got time to serve and all the rest of it. But for me, I'm happy to post out and away from my battalion if I'm somewhere I am now. So I'm in a training establishment currently for 2 years. Somewhere like this, I don't mind because everyone else is in the same boat. They've all come from different units, different regiments, different corps, all the rest of it. We're all here doing the same thing. This is just me personally, would find it very difficult to take the sergeant major job in a different battalion, because for a senior NCO to that point, W2, There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears have went into life to get to that point. And I just find it quite difficult to maybe go into a position in a different infantry battalion, and I've only just been there and known that I'm only going to be there for 2 years. Whereas I put it to the perspective of in your own battalions, using me only as the example here, because just thinking back myself. Like, I've been on operations with the Corps Bean. I've seen people and had been quite close to people who've unfortunately paid the ultimate sacrifice for the Corps Bean. I've done everything else, all the exercises. I've been through so many changes with the Corps. So your blood, you're sort of more into the Corps Bean means a lot more to you. Someone who's like a private soldier joining the army now, it may not mean as much to you when you get to your 14, 15, 16, 17th year point, because you'll have bounced around so many times, so that system has already gone then. As such, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't got any other gen across it. What's the positives of it for it then? Say you have like a reconnaissance infantry unit, a light roll unit, and mountain unit, a mobile unit. It's completely just pulling my backside. If you have someone who started off their career as a private soldier, and I've done a little bit of mobile unit, a little bit of reconnaissance soldier, a little bit of light roll, they bounce around as they promote and they move around as they progress through their career. When they get to the dizzy heights of like sort of 20 odd years, whatever, and they are then becoming company sergeant majors and all the rest of it, the wealth of experience they will have to bring to the battlefield and to the tactical advantage, because they know all the different roles. That's the way there I could see it could have a positive effect, because clearly, if you join a certain regiment and they're in a certain role, that's the only thing you're going to live and breathe, unless you take the time to go and flipping put yourself to sleep at night reading other people's doctrine, which I'm pretty sure no one's going to do. So that's the only sort of positive thing. That's one of the positives there I see about it. I suppose then you're giving someone later on, if you're giving them the opportunity to spice things up and not get bored. Like I talked about in one of the other previous videos of this year about going SF. If you're bored, don't sign off. Go try something new. I suppose this could be a positive way of that, where if you get slightly bored of just doing light roll and you're constantly, if you're berging all the time and want a bit of mobility, you promote into mobility and you jump across there. So you're constantly changing what you're doing over however long you're going to do, which then in turn will keep you interested, and then you would potentially have a more longer, funner, and more interesting career. Because definitely I'm something the same, and I think the army does get this right anyway, where we change our jobs every 2 years. Because my worst nightmare would be to rock up to an office in a little cubicle, maybe not so much like this, but and clocking in at 9 and just doing the same thing day in, day out from a full adult sort of working career. And the army does get something right, where you're constantly changing them 2 years from your roles, and if you are motivated and you want to do the rank structure as well, and you get your promotion, that's constantly changing, and all the jobs. So there is constant change within the army, which helps people like myself and other people who like to stay here longer. It keeps us engaged for longer and they have more enjoyment out of it. So you've got that aspect of it as well. And I suppose then it's easier, you would say, to manage, because then when it comes down to promotions, putting people in places around the military, there's not so much of cap badges looking after their own as such. You then become the loyalty to the role, which then indeed it becomes to the whole machine of the British Army, I would say, would be the positives. And then the other thing you got to look in then is, okay, where's it going right so far? And you got to look at, I know Royal Marines quite clearly are not in the army, they are Royal Marines, but I know a few guys in the Royal Marines, and I know a few guys from who are in my unit who were in the Royal Marines and came across because they're from back home, and they've joined the Royal Irish now, they've done well here, but they've explained the Marines where it's, I don't know if it's different now, if there's anyone watching this in the Marines can jump in and let us know. They always do that triple P thing as well. So whenever they go to Limpston to start becoming a Marine, that's exactly what it says in the thing. You're going to be a Marine. So there's no one there going thinking what they're going elsewise they're going to do. It's the main objective is to get the green lid with the Commando Dagger, Royal Marine Commando first. I believe after Limpston is then when you get drafted, I think is the right terminology, to where you're going to go, where it's like that normal fighting unit where you could be out just doing the normal stuff that we would do in the infantry, or you're going to do the boarding stuff, amphibious stuff. Then that's when they look at the other stuff like clerks and chefs and all the rest of it. So everyone is commando trained first. I think I'm right there. And then all that kind of gets dished out at the same time. Let's look a bit closer to home, army-wise. Parachute Regiment. Every single person going to Catterick wants to be as in they're going to join the Parachute Regiment. They want to be a para. So it doesn't matter if it's either two of the battalions. Obviously, it originally was the three. Now it's just the two for normal infantry, two or three para. They're going there to get the maroon lid and get their wings. That's the main objective. That's what they want. And then once after that, and they get assigned to either two or three, even though both battalions may operate slightly differently as how they go about business, it's still the same role, same job, airborne infantry. They're going to be doing the same thing. So they've got that cross. It doesn't matter whenever you cross-pollinate people promoting. The only difference they potentially might have is people promote into SFSG and stuff, because obviously that'll be a slightly different look at life on what the normal infantry would do. But that cross-contamination stuff between them, it doesn't matter because they're all the same role. Other ones then, even though it's not, which is quite, you could say it's quite junior, it is the rifles. I want to say it's around 2005, 6. I could be wrong when the rifles stood up. Please, there's definitely some veterans out there who were in like the green jackets and all the rest of it, who came to form up the rifles. Because I was in, when I was in basic training in 2006, tail end of 6, 7, my platoon was Rifle 7, and it was all Royal Irish and guys going to the rifles, so it was definitely formed then. That was 2007, right? So but what you see now is so like that's what 18, 19, 18 year. I don't know how old the rifles, you let me know, but it's, you could say it's older now, and any rifleman I've met, that is their thing first. So it doesn't matter if they're any other of the battalions and the different roles that they do within the rifles. So like the mixtures of roles they do there, it's that rifleman first, and they're very in behind that now, and it's a very unifying thing. So that is probably, that's another argument for when you start to make something just generic. So like an Infantry Battalion 1, Infantry Battalion 2, Mountain Battalion 1, whatever it may be, then do you just become united under that own one banner? Even though it may be like, I don't want to do that first, but then a few years as a grinder keeps going, eventually that would happen. Because I'm quite sure back then, please let me know if you were involved in them changes. Where are you still serving now? Were you in any of them previous regiments? So say the green jackets and definitely the Dorsets. I can't remember which the other ones were. Were you in them, and were you in that transition period into the rifles? And how did you feel? And then probably from someone else who was just born into the rifles. Like what's the differences there? Where did, from the regimental history from the previous regiments, what happened to that? What does that look like within the rifles? How do you go about doing that? Because I would probably think people who make these big decisions would look at when they're going to case study or whatever, would look at units like the rifles and stuff. And let's look at our most babyest, our most juniorest one, which would be the Ranger Regiment, which has stood up 4 or 5 years now, you want to say, and that was obviously formed from very different polarizing units. So the argument I would make for when the rifles, when all them different, even though you may look at it as very county strong, it's still English regiments being formed in. When you look at the Ranger Regiment, you've got now the added thing of, you've now brought in 1 Scots who went to form 1 Rangers. So that's now completely different culture inside this new regiment. So I think off the top of my head, it's 1 Scots, a battalion for the PWRR, a battalion from the Lanks, and then another battalion from the Rifles. So you've got like 3 English battalions there, born in England, and then the Scots, so like a Celtic sort of battalion. So you've now got a different culture mixed in there. And with 1 Ranger, because it used to be 1 Scots, you would probably, at the earlier stages, my division, so Union Division, would be the feeder battalions. So anyone really from the Royal Irish, all the battalions from the Jocks, I would argue now Yorks as well, because they're now in the Union, and Royal Welsh. Anyone wanting to go Rangers would then feed into that 1 Ranger. Now I do believe, and I have heard of it, some people now going, definitely from us, we had people go and they've went into one of the other battalions, which is good to see now, because then they'll stop that sort of, certain people coming from a different regiment aiming for whatever Ranger regiment it was where their regiment came from. And if the more turn around the wheel that Ranger regiment goes, the more cross pollinated it becomes, then it's just, you're a Ranger first then. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter where you were from. And by that, when we get to that stage, no one going to the Ranger Regiment would have been to any of them battalions anyway. They're just looking at the Ranger Regiment. They're not going, oh, okay, I'm going to go one, because it was still, you have to look at slang and stuff that's going around. And whenever, just slightly as the Rangers were formed, there was still slang going around with our guys when they're looking at it. Oh, I'm going one Scots. Oh no, sorry, one Ranger. So you were sort of mixing up your language there, whereas now it's just full on 1, 2, 3, or 4 Ranger. So yeah, so you got the Royal Marines, even though they're not army, paras, rifles, Rangers, Ranger Regiment. So there are examples of a regiment of multiple battalions that has no, so they're not like a regimental, it's regimental, like based on a county or a country as such, where everyone is going to that role, whether it be a commando, whether it be a para, rifles, riflemen, rangers, ranger, I suppose now. That's why we're the Harris Rangers. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. It's not all doom and gloom. Quite clearly, if you're someone who's stepping up to join the army now, and I understand that there'll be a lot of people now jump in the comment section about how disgusting it is, and the government's destroying it, and X, Y, Z, and I get it. And if you're someone who's done a lot of service in a certain regiment and you joined up being that, that county regiment or whatever it may be, it would be hard to see. But just think, we've got to put ourselves back to, right back to the very beginning, and how much the British Army and how much the regiments and the units and how regiments have came and gone and all the rest of it. And it's just, change can be hard to go through at times, but it's all for the best and better for the army as a whole. And that's what we wanted to see, isn't it? We want a good operating environment for the next generation to go in, and for us, hopefully me, in like 30 years time, to be in my armchair sipping on a whiskey or whatever it may be, and watching the younger ones go away and do good stuff with the walk that you would have walked. And in Royal Irish terms, we say, with our motto, it's Fala Bala, which is clear the way. So it'd be very nice to see each generation clearing the way for that next generation to move through. Thank you very much for joining me. Very interesting topic. I hope it may have caused some sort of debate here down below. If you are going to start debating down below in the comment section, please, let's make it a bit more sort of, have a point, have an opinion. Don't just say it's shit and all the rest of it, and that's why everything's doom and gloom. Bring good points to the party, specifically if you're a veteran, and more importantly, I wanted to hear if you were that sort of like Devon and Dorset's, Green Jackets and all the rest of it, them county regiments, when that transition to rifles, it'd be really good to hear, what that was like for yourselves, going through that and all the rest of it. Thanks very much for joining me, and if you did like this and you're completely new here to this video itself, you can get plenty more stuff like this on this channel, so please consider subscribing, and I will see you again on a future video. Thanks again, and see you again in the next one.